Hey, CityCast listener, this holiday season, you could win a prize for doing simple things like ordering takeout from a local restaurant. It's all part of the DC Holiday Hunt from District Bridges. There are over $3,000 in exclusive prizes that you could win while supporting local businesses, completing fun missions, and crisscrossing DC, which, as you know, is one of CityCast listeners' favorite activities. And with no app required to play, it's easy and can be done at your own pace. Play now through January 5th for your chance to win. Just go to dcholidayhunt.org. Once again, that's dcholidayhunt.org. Happy playing.
Today on CityCast DC, Trump is on his way back to the White House, and from federal workers to the council, the Washington Post's Emily Davies explains how the city is preparing and what another Trump presidency means for DC. Today's Wednesday, December 4th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. So, Emily, as much as I am kind of personally trying to avoid this reality, the truth is that Trump's inauguration is right around the corner. We're in this kind of weird interim period where folks are really prepping in D.C. How is the D.C. Council preparing for this new reality?
It's a good question, and it's actually a hard one to answer definitively because their strategy in many ways is to stay quiet. And so the council really doesn't want us or anyone knowing exactly what they're doing right now because the whole DC approach at a high level has been don't poke the bear. Let's stay quiet. Let's stay out of President-elect Trump's way and show him that we are easy to work with and just not worth his time. So the idea really from the council right now is to just lay low.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know that Mayor Bowser wanted a meeting with Trump. Has that happened? Is that happening?
As of today, which is December 3rd, it has not happened that I'm aware of at this time. It certainly hasn't happened in a way that I have gotten wind of, and I think I would know. But that does not mean that there's not a lot of communication going on right now between the Bowser administration and the incoming Trump administration, or between the Bowser administration and the city council and Republican and Democratic members on Capitol Hill. So I do think there are a lot of back-channel conversations happening, maybe not yet between principals, but between people who have some control and say over what might happen in the next 4 years.
Do you have any sense of what those conversations or what the tone of those conversations might be like?
If you ask folks in D.C. in a way that maybe isn't on the record in the traditional sense, what they'll tell you is that D.C. has not a lot of power. Like, the Trump administration with control of Congress can do a lot to D.C. And so I think from the D.C. government up to the federal government, the tone right now is polite, it's respectful, it's like welcoming in a way that I think we didn't see the last time President-elect Trump was here. So, I think that the power imbalance is dictating the tone of those conversations.
Ooh, you are not making me feel real reassured, I have to tell you. Well, does this mean that when it comes to how Bowser might deal with Trump, we might be seeing more of her diplomacy side as opposed to her sort of, I'm going to paint Black Lives Matter on the side of, near the White House kind of energy?
I think that's exactly right. Now, we'll see if that changes if the president-elect takes a really aggressive approach to DC. I think right now what the mayor and others are really banking on is that it's a real pain to run a city. It's not glamorous work. And so I think they hope to just make clear how much of a burden that would be to him, that he has better things to do, and that they have matters here under control. But I think that approach in many ways is contingent on not doing things like painting Black Lives Matter Plaza or being outspoken against him in a way that would incentivize him to step in for political gain. In some areas that feels quote unquote easier, like she can just not paint another plaza. In other ways, it's harder. Stuff like crime is not exactly in her complete control. So if there are high profile crimes that target, let's say, federal workers who are here for the president-elect, that would maybe pose a real problem for her, for the mayor, for the council, in a way that they can't really control.
Let's talk about some of the changes that potentially could be coming to D.C. that folks are worried about. Some of these changes could be taking effect pretty quickly. What is the deal with this new bathroom bill I keep hearing about?
So Representative Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina, introduced a bill that would ban transgender people from using bathrooms that align with their gender identity. In the way her bill is currently written, that would apply in buildings owned by the federal government or the D.C. government. D.C.'s lawyers are sort of working to figure out how widely that would apply if enacted. Like if a school, for example, a D.C. school is technically like a D.C. government building, you could expect that they would try to fight that. I don't know how that would hold up in court. I think, again, going back to this tone of diplomacy, my expectation is what the Bowser administration and the council will try to do there is talk to that representative and be like, hey, you actually don't want D.C. in all this. Like, let's just keep it to the federal government. If that's what you want to do, then fine. That's not exactly our problem. The House Speaker has already enacted a policy that would require people to use facilities that correlate with their gender assigned at birth. So, like, let's just leave it there. That would be one approach. Another approach, which I could not get Representative Mace's office to answer me on, is how that policy would actually be enforced. Like, will there be, like, monitors at bathrooms? So I think there are a lot of questions about whether that bill is more, like, political. She's like, I think the representative is now selling merchandise sort of based on this whole thing, or if it actually would have, like, tangible real-life impacts in the D.C. region.
How likely do you see this as actually passing?
I'm so hesitant to make predictions. You know, I just feel like we're in this really unknown space. Do I expect to see kids in DC schools banned from using a bathroom that aligns with their gender identity? No, I don't. I don't expect to see that. I could be wrong, though.
I don't know. Something about this topic is like, people in D.C. don't want this. I agree with you. I hope and suspect it is not the kind of thing we're going to, like, screen flip and then we're all dealing with this. That is my hope and what I think. But just generally, I just feel like people don't want this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to pay attention to what President-elect Trump himself has said repeatedly he wants to do when looking for indication of how the D.C. region might change. And he's talked a lot about, for example, cutting the federal workforce. So that I could see cutting or moving some parts of the federal workforce. Like, if that happens, that would have a really profound impact on the D.C. region in terms of its economy and culture. So I think, like, looking at sort of big promises that he made repeatedly on the campaign trail and thinking about how those could bear down here, like, that's where I would start.
So let's talk about that because, as we know, Trump has talked about wanting to create this new Department of Government Efficiency, and sort of one of their big priorities is getting people back in the office 5 days a week. Things like, you know, I know a lot of federal workers in my life are concerned about cuts. How are D.C. residents feeling about this?
I think D.C. residents at a high level, like, don't like being told what to do by the federal government or how to live. That's not popular here, especially not by the Trump administration, given the political makeup of this city. So we can just start by saying that. At the same time, this return to office mandate is sort of one of the few areas where I see some overlap in what the local government wants and what the incoming federal government wants. The mayor has been very clear that she wants people back in the office. And, you know, some federal workers, I think, want their colleagues back in the office. Others really don't. I think if you wander downtown at lunch, you're maybe more likely to find the people who are in favor of return to office because they're in the office. But a lot of people work at home for really important reasons. Childcare, elderly care, commutes, people have moved. I mean, it really sort of cuts to the core of people's, like, intimate decisions. And so it's a really contested question. But I will say that I think the D.C. government, a lot of businesses in D.C. would love to see more people back in the office.
So this might be one of those things where there's kind of strange bedfellows where the mayor might be like, oh, well, some of the things that the Trump administration is saying we could kind of get behind.
Right. And I think it's going to be a real dance because let's say they see ways to use some of the GOP promises that might benefit DC and be like, hey, use us as a testing ground. You have power here, do it. That could benefit DC in some narrow ways, but it also could provide clearer paths to using that federal power and exercising it in ways that the DC government might not want. So it's sort of all about, like, how can we maneuver politically to get what we want, not get what we don't want, which is sort of the ultimate political question. But I think with the real acute power imbalance that we're going to see over the next 4 years, or at least the next 18 months till the midterms, it's going to be a real political test for the DC leadership.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun, but with Paulson and Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson and Nace is a DC law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the DC community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates Samantha Peters and Maya Perry handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson and Nace has even been recognized as one of U.S. News' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson and Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com. That's PAULSONANDNACE.com. Or call 202-463-1999.
Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you're a magic maker like me, the person in your crew responsible for the parties and the menus and keeping the whole squad on theme and on time, the holidays can be so much fun, but they can also kind of run you down. Therapy can be a great way to bring yourself some comfort. Maybe you want to learn how to set some boundaries with your friends and family this time of year, or maybe you're working on coping skills for when you get overwhelmed. Therapy can empower you to be the best version of yourself in any situation. If you're thinking of making a change, BetterHelp wants to be there for you. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/CityCast today to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/CityCast.
The world comes to Washington, D.C. this December. Join us for the 11th Annual Winter National Embassy Showcase at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center on December 5th. Presented by World Trade Center, Washington, D.C., Winter National offers a one-of-a-kind experience featuring representatives from over 60 embassies, promoting their countries through vibrant and interactive displays of visual art, food, and handcrafts, as well as travel, tourism, and trade. Attendees can shop the marketplace for artisanal goods like jewelry and hats, or ceramics and hand-carved wood sculptures, sample cultural delicacies, and explore countries' exhibits featuring arts and culture, commodities, and diaspora communities in traditional dress. Don't miss this free, lively midday celebration. Register at rrbitc.com/winternational.
The Trump administration has been really talking big about threatening to cut federal positions and move jobs out of D.C. to other parts of the country. If that happens, what would that mean for our city?
Moving big swaths of the federal government out of D.C. would have a really, really profound impact, I think, on D.C. and its neighbors. We forget sometimes that Maryland and Virginia, house a lot of federal workers. And the ramifications of losing those people or of those people losing their jobs is hard to quantify. Think about the metro and people who ride the metro to work every day. Without that ridership, the way that our public transportation system functions could change dramatically. So as DC residents start to really think about what a Trump presidency could do to their daily experiences here, considering that workforce question is a big one.
Well, I thought that Youngkin said that Virginians that lost their jobs could just get other jobs. It would all be fine.
He did say that. And, I'm really curious to see if he has put any job training programs into practice in anticipation of those changes. Because, That's a big statement, and it's hard for people to transition industries. So for those people and for the sake of the economy, I mean, I hope he's right, but I haven't seen any evidence of that.
I want to drill into this because why do you think Trump is so keen to sort of be like, yeah, I'm going to really put the pressure on federal workers? I have this theory that it's just sort of a way to pick a group of people and signal how powerful he is by kind of low-key threatening them. What is going on? Why does Trump want to start out his administration by threatening to cut federal positions and change the lives of folks who live in this area and maybe work for the federal government?
I think it's really important to understand Trump as a businessman, and he's now running the government as a business. I think that's how he sees it. And we've seen through his record and also the records of other big-time businessmen who really think of themselves that way, that they like making cuts and making things more efficient and firing people and sort of like exercising power and authority that way. I think in some ways it's sort of simple. And I think it's also important to recognize, and I've been trying to talk to people about this and sort of hearing this perspective, that there are parts of this he maybe could be right about. I mean, our federal government is sprawling and massive and famously is not always the most efficient. So, I mean, we'll see where he cuts and how those cuts really affect people. I mean, I think some of what he's talking about is switching like career civil servants for political appointees. I think that in the DC area is pretty alarming to people who know how much the government is really dependent on expertise that comes from spending a career inside of various agencies. So me encouraging listeners to be open-minded is not to say there's not real, like, siren level concern here. But I'm curious to see how that goes. I also think it's an important point to say there are Republican federal workers who voted for Trump knowing that he might cut their jobs and that they believed in him with so much conviction that they were willing to take that economic risk to their personal lives to support him. And I think it's worth exploring why.
I mean, it goes back to that conversation we were having a moment ago about these strange bedfellows. Just the other day, I saw that Bernie Sanders, of all people, tweeted that Elon Musk was right about some of this federal spending. I do wonder, like, how this is going to play out. Personally, couldn't be me voting for my own economic personal peril, but seems to be working out for some of these folks, so we'll see.
I mean, I'm very curious to see what decisions he makes, what decisions his administration is able to execute, and then how that impacts this place that we live and love.
So let's talk about immigration. So, there have been threats of mass deportation of immigrants. As we know, D.C. has this huge migrant population, many of whom were bused here over the last few years from places like Texas and Arizona. If Trump does follow through with these threats of mass deportation, what does that mean for D.C. and our migrant population?
The way I'm thinking about it, and I hesitate to answer this question with too much authority, just because some of this I really want to wait and see, and guessing feels like a dangerous game. But I think the way to think about like hot button political issues like that in DC, because it's not a state, the connection between the federal government and local people is more intimate than arguably anywhere else across the entire country. So anything that the federal government wants to do, they can do more easily in DC. And there's fewer safeguards and fewer layers between the federal government and just like an everyday resident or an everyday migrant who lives here. So I think that's how I would think about that issue.
In addition to thinking about what this means for the actual migrant community and the people who this would affect directly, I have to imagine this also might mean something for DC's economy more widely. Do you have any sense of what that might be?
Yeah, I mean, you look at not just DC, but again, you look at Maryland, you look at Virginia, and there are a lot of industries that are really dependent on workers from other places. And look at the crab industry, the Eastern Shore. I mean, there's a lot of parts of this region that would feel a dramatic change if the way immigration works in this country shifts.
So let's look ahead to Inauguration Weekend. It's not that far away, January 18th to the 20th. It also is MLK weekend, so that'll be an interesting time, lots of feelings. There have been rumblings about folks removing their listings on Airbnb and trying to pressure Airbnb to do a blackout in DC. I've also heard people who are like, I'm just trying to make bank. I'm going to overcharge these people who are coming to the inauguration. How is DC feeling about inauguration weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There are some activists who are urging Airbnb hosts to take their apartments off the market entirely for inauguration weekend to discourage people from coming and sort of force Trump to see an empty city meet him, which, you know, he likes crowd sizes. So I'm sure that would be unpopular. Other people would say residents here should increase their prices and donate the profits to more liberal causes. I think that the main question I have about all of this, like these movements, to me, from where I'm sitting, they don't seem to be picking up that much steam. The last time we had Trump in office, it felt like this city was electrified. You know, people from both sides of the aisle were really taking to the streets and trying to make their perspectives clear and trying to make the size of their movements clear. And we're seeing like a lot of quiet resignation now instead of the fiery resistance we've seen in the past. So these Airbnb blackouts, like I just don't know if people are energetic enough or hopeful enough, maybe is the right word, to really turn out like that and make a movement happen.
It's interesting that you say this. I was looking back on my old Instagram post and I saw a picture of myself from 2016 from inauguration. And I was like out in the streets protesting with my like radical lefty friends. And I looked so full of like energy. I also was like 8 years younger. But looking to the inauguration ahead of us, I cannot even imagine having the energy to be out in the streets. I cannot even imagine having the like focused and the wherewithal and the energy to like be out with my friends organizing like that. And I feel like that is how people are feeling. I think people are kind of depressed and not feeling hopeful, but also just exhausted. I feel like that's really the energy that I'm sensing. None of the sort of what you were describing that we all felt in 2016.
Right. I too have been reading back some of our old coverage from that time. And I think we forget how activated this city was and how activated so many people were, whether they were here in support of Trump or against him. And it feels like whatever energy that has been replaced by like a focus on self-care. Like I almost imagine like the people who were out in the streets in 2016 are going to like have a face mask on at home and like be watching like a comedy. I mean, that is the sense I'm getting of DC right now.
You said it, Emily. Like, that is exactly the vibe that I'm picking up on. There is an image that I see all over social media of, like, a group of Black women with, like, drinks standing on a building, watching the world burn, just, like, sipping away. Like, oh, I guess that's what's happening. I think that's where a lot of folks are at.
Right. And, you know, like, we'll see how long that lasts. I don't know. But that's where we are now. That's what I'm seeing.
Emily, thank you for covering all of it, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.